Welcome to a new episode of Art Dig. So I want you to imagine a world where the Italian state drops an astonishing 30 million euros on a single classical Renaissance portrait by Caravaggio.
Right, which is just a massive amount of money.
Oh, completely staggering. But then just across the border, the foundation of Victor Vasarely, an absolute pioneer of op art.
Oh, yeah, the visionary who practically engineered modern optical illusions.
Exactly. The guy using complex geometric mapping to trick the human eye. Well, his foundation is literally crumbling from neglect.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a jarring, almost absurd contrast in how we assign value.
It really is the perfect snapshot of a much larger structural collision. I mean, we are watching the architecture of our cultural heritage forcefully grind against the reality of modern economics.
Which is the core mission of our deep dive today. We have a stack of 5 brilliant essays from ArtDig, and they all revolve around this singular, massive tension.
Right, the battle between preserving traditional physical art and the explosive boundary-pushing innovations of the digital and AI age.
Exactly. We have a lot of ground to cover for you today. We're exploring how a lost Rembrandt was essentially resurrected by forensic tech.
Super fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and how Henri Matisse's bedridden years mapped the exact blueprint for modern virtual reality accessibility.
Which I still can't quite wrap my head around.
Right. And finally, why tech visionary Jan LeCun's new billion-dollar AI project might actually become the ultimate art curator of the 21st century.
So we're looking at a landscape where the definitions of space, physical limitation, and authorship are being entirely rewritten.
Totally.
It is, at its core, a conversation about the mechanics of cultural survival.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with the sheer economics of attention, because the infrastructure gap between the old masters and the new realities is, well, it's staggering.
There really is.
If you look at the traditional global art market, the recent Art Basel and UBS report shows it sitting at about $59.6 billion.
Right.
That sounds substantial, but it represents a highly fragile 4% growth.
Meaning the market is still stagnating below pre-pandemic levels.
Exactly. We are seeing major, historically insulated galleries, like Stephen Friedman, just closing their doors. The physical gallery model is heavily strained right now.
Oh, the overhead is simply becoming mathematically unsustainable for a lot of them. You have immense geopolitical volatility.
Oh, for sure.
And, supply chain disruptions affecting physical transport, plus skyrocketing insurance premiums.
Right. The traditional model relies on high-friction physical transactions in premium real estate.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you pivot to the tech sector, where the capitalization is operating in a completely different stratosphere. Jan LeCun, one of the foundational architects of modern AI, just raised $1 billion for his new startup, AMI.
$1 billion.
Right. And the critical detail here is the mechanism of what he's building. He isn't training another language model to just predict the next word.
No, he's building an embodied AI.
Yes. An architecture designed to understand the physical world. Gravity, spatial relations, three-dimensional permanence.
It is $1 billion bet on a machine that can process physical reality.
While the traditional art world is quite literally trying to figure out how to keep the gallery lights on.
True. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's tempting to view this as a clean narrative, right? Where digital tech just replaces the physical gallery.
But it's not that simple.
Not at all. The digital infrastructure is actually grappling with severe economic fractures of its own. Look at Nifty Gateway.
Oh.
They publicly launched this ambitious initiative to onboard 1 billion NFT collectors. The structural thesis was that artificial digital scarcity would seamlessly replicate the physical art market.
And it failed completely.
It failed completely. The underlying demand simply did not map to their projections.
Because the mechanics of artificial scarcity just couldn't sustain themselves without the physical aura of the object.
Precisely. And beyond crypto, the broader spatial computing ecosystem is facing massive friction.
You're talking about John Carmack's critique?
Yeah. The former CTO of Oculus recently published a heavy critique of Meta's economic structure for VR developers.
He targeted their 30% platform fee, right? Calling it wasteful churn.
Exactly. His argument is rooted in basic ecosystem economics. Instead of taxing the developers who are actually building the spatial frontier, Meta should be aggressively subsidizing them.
Because you can't build a thriving cultural metaverse if you are strangling the creators at the toll booth.
You really can't.
So it is an infrastructure bottleneck in both realms. The physical gallery takes a 50% commission. The digital app store takes 30%.
Yeah.
And while humans are fighting over the economics, we have to acknowledge that AI is already acting as an active participant in our cultural arenas. The sources note that ChatGPT is currently being utilized to analyze massive, complex cultural ecosystems.
Like the Venice Biennale.
Yes, exactly. And the Biennale right now is navigating severe geopolitical tension. For instance, there are official protests coming from Kyiv regarding the Russian presence at the event. Now, to be absolutely clear to you listening, we are impartially reporting the facts exactly as they are laid out in the source material.
Yes, absolutely. We are not taking a political stance on this conflict.
Not at all. We are just sharing the sources. But analytically, it is fascinating that we are asking a neural network to parse an event deeply intertwined with raw human geopolitical fracture.
It really raises a profound question about the limits of algorithmic comprehension.
How so?
Well, when an AI processes the Venice Biennale, it's scraping press releases, curatorial statements, global sentiment data. But is it capturing the actual political weight and human grief of those protests?
Or is it merely mapping statistical proximities between words?
Exactly. Human curators struggle immensely to balance global openness with geopolitical reality. Handing that parsing mechanism over to an AI is a massive paradigm shift.
Wow, yeah. So let me challenge the economic premise we set up earlier. If both the traditional market and the digital metaverse are struggling with infrastructure, maybe this isn't a simple evolution.
Okay, where are you going with this?
Is the traditional art market basically acting like analog mechanical watchmakers in the age of the Apple Watch, where the physical canvas and the gallery aren't trying to compete with digital speed, but instead, the sheer inefficiency and physicality of the paint becomes the ultimate luxury asset?
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. The inefficiency is the value.
Right.
The physical vulnerability of the canvas is exactly what gives it weight. And this brings us to an incredible convergence.
What's that?
Technology isn't just a competitor trying to digitize everything. In many of the most crucial instances, advanced tech is the specific mechanism saving the physical tradition.
Oh, the Rijksmuseum study is the perfect example of this.
It really is.
They just wrapped up a massive 2-year forensic investigation into a 17th century painting titled Vision of Zacharias in the Temple.
Because for decades, this piece was relegated to the murky category of like Circle of or School of Rembrandt.
Exactly. But they didn't just stare at the brushstrokes. They utilized macro X-ray fluorescence scanning.
Basically mapping the elemental composition of the canvas.
Yeah, they literally penetrated the top layers of varnish to scan for chemical signatures of heavy metals, specifically lead, copper, and mercury.
Wow.
By mapping these specific chemical distribution patterns, they could reconstruct the dead coloring and underpainting, matching it flawlessly to Rembrandt's highly specific workflow.
Technology literally resurrected a lost masterwork.
Yes.
What's fascinating here is the democratization of certainty.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, in the past, reattribution relied entirely on the subjective visual connoisseurship of a few elite experts. Now we have empirical chemical blueprints,
Right.
but technology and modern resources are also fundamentally altering the physical logistics of how you, the public, interact with these works.
Oh, like the Bayeux Tapestry at the British Museum.
Exactly. It's an incredibly fragile textile, highly restricted in terms of access.
But recently, the billionaire Igor Tolchinsky provided a £5 million sponsorship designed specifically to engineer a way for school children to safely view it.
Which highlights a grim reality, honestly. Modern private philanthropy is having to engineer solutions where public cultural funding has evaporated.
It does. We also see physical engineering changing historical context. Look at the monumental Rubens ceiling painting at Whitehall in London.
Oh, the one designed to be viewed from an immense, almost divine distance, right? High above the viewer.
Exactly. But recently, they installed a specialized mechanical elevator, allowing the public to ascend and view the brushwork at a microscopic distance.
So we're using modern spatial mechanics to completely subvert the 17th century intention of the artist.
Right. But I struggle with the downstream effects of that intervention. Because if we are constantly using technology to physically alter our proximity to art, what happens to the inherent aura of the object when preservation requires isolation?
That's a really deep question.
The essay brings up a brilliant paradox regarding Donatello's bronze statue, the Gattamelata. It's a Renaissance masterpiece meant to dominate a public square.
But the physical environment is merciless.
Merciless. Atmospheric moisture and pollutants are causing bronze disease. It's a corrosive chemical reaction of chloride salts that is literally eating the sculpture.
Right.
So the structural debate is, do you lock the statue indoors in a sterile climate-controlled vacuum to arrest the chemical degradation, or do you leave it outside? If you remove a public monument from the public square, haven't you killed its purpose anyway?
It is the ultimate conservation paradox. You are choosing between material destruction and contextual destruction.
Exactly.
But historically, if we examine the trajectory of artistic evolution, this exact friction.
The battle against degradation.
Yeah, the battle against physical degradation and spatial limitation.
Right.
It's the primary catalyst for creative resilience. Constraints do not halt art. They force it to mutate.
Which maps perfectly onto the Henri Matisse exhibition currently at the Grand Palais in Paris.
Covering the final 13 years of his life.
Right, a period where his physical limitations were absolute. He was bedridden.
Completely unable to paint.
He physically lacked the stamina and mobility to stand at an easel and manipulate oil paint. But instead of stopping, he fundamentally altered his medium.
He used brightly painted paper and scissors to create his famous cutouts.
He completely bypassed his own physical degradation by inventing an entirely new visual language based on reduction and form.
It's incredible.
It reminds me of early video game developers trying to write a complex game on a cartridge that had practically zero memory.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You couldn't rely on bloated, complex graphics. You were forced to strip every single thing away and find the absolute most elegant, minimal line of code to convey the entire experience.
Right.
Matisse had to strip away the complex physical brushwork and rely on the sheer efficiency of the cut line. He turned a massive physical constraint into pure innovation.
That is a phenomenal mechanical analogy. The constraint forces the elegance. And if we look at the mechanics of modern accessibility technology, we are seeing engineers utilize that exact same philosophy.
Really? How so?
Well, when a physical limitation exists, you design a new mechanical input to bypass it. Alchemy Labs just introduced a brilliant update to their VR game, Dimensional Double Shift.
Oh, the pinch-based turning system.
Exactly. They integrated a pinch-based artificial turning system utilizing hand tracking.
Which is a profound structural solution, because standard virtual reality relies entirely on your physical vestibular system.
Your full body mobility, yeah.
Right, to achieve 6 degrees of freedom. If you are sitting in a wheelchair or simply cannot physically pivot your spine 180 degrees, the entire spatial illusion of the VR environment breaks down.
Exactly. By mapping a micro gesture, a simple pinch of the fingers to a macro rotational axis, Alchemy essentially rewrote the physical requirement of the medium.
They decoupled spatial movement from physical mobility.
They adapted the physics of the virtual world to the constraints of the user's body, precisely as Matisse adapted his medium. And this translation of data across physical barriers extends far beyond gaming. The Space Telescope Science Institute recently completed a project using raw data from the James Webb Space Telescope.
Oh, this was amazing.
They took the highly complex infrared imaging of the planet Uranus and engineered tactile topographical resin panels.
So they translated visual light data into physical texture.
Exactly. So that blind and visually impaired individuals can literally run their hands over the rings of the planet.
That is staggering. You are taking the most complex visual data ever captured by human engineering photons traveling billions of miles through a vacuum and translating it into a physical topography.
It completely shatters the definition of what it means to view an image.
It really does.
It proves that the future of accessibility isn't just about constructing physical ramps to museum doors. It's about cross-sensory translation.
Yeah, we are in an era of intense creative cross-pollination. Because we are successfully breaking down these physical and sensory limits, the very spaces and materials we use to experience art are undergoing a radical mutation.
We're witnessing the deep hybridization of art, geology, human biology, and machine intelligence.
And the examples of this hybridization in the sources are almost surreal.
Yeah.
Take the U-Haul Gallery in Los Angeles.
Right. First of all, the venue itself subverts the pristine, sterilized white cube museum model.
It's a transient utilitarian space. And inside, the artist Alexis Rockman exhibited a painting constructed using actual prehistoric tar sourced directly from the La Brea tar pits.
It is a remarkable convergence of timelines. You have a highly viscous prehistoric geological material that has trapped and preserved biological fossils for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah.
And now it is being manipulated as a contemporary fluid medium in a modernized transient space. It creates a physical bridge across deep time.
Deep time on one end and hyperfuturism on the other.
Right.
Look at the artist So-Gwyn Chung, who recently showcased her work at Art Basel Hong Kong.
Right.
Her entire practice revolves around what she terms human-machine creative entanglement. She doesn't just use software.
She engineers physical, kinematic, robotic arms.
Yes, arms that are synced to her own biological movements and brain waves. The human and the robot paint collaboratively on the same physical canvas in real time.
Which completely dismantles our traditional romanticized concept of authorship.
Totally.
When you analyze a brushstroke on her canvas, who is the author, is it the human who engineered the algorithmic parameters? Or is it the machine that executed the physical gesture with a micro variation the human could never replicate?
It's a blur. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where I have to push back against this narrative of a seamless digital hybrid utopia.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's look at the deployment of the Apple Vision Pro. The sources highlight an app called Museas, which utilizes spatial computing to let you take high-resolution, volumetric scans of masterpieces and virtually hang them in your own living room.
You can have a Van Gogh hovering over your coffee table.
Right. But mechanically, aren't we just engineering our own isolation?
That's a fair point.
The fundamental architecture of a museum isn't just about holding the painting. It's about the collective, shared human awe of standing next to a total stranger and processing culture together.
Yeah, communal processing.
Exactly. If we are all sitting alone in our apartments, strapped into headsets, curating our own private digital Louvre, it mirrors the dystopian technological warnings found in Timur Bekmambetov's film Mercy.
Your skepticism is entirely warranted here. Bekmambetov's Mercy specifically interrogates the psychological decay of a society entirely mediated by algorithmic interfaces and digital isolation.
So technology is never a neutral vector.
Never. It operates as a dual mechanism. It can be an unprecedented tool for cultural preservation, but it can simultaneously function as an instrument of profound control and isolation.
It is an architectural shift from public friction to private comfort.
Exactly. And to understand the stakes of that shift, we have to look at artists who use material to fight control. The essay highlights the artist Xiao Ziyes.
Oh, the porcelain sculptures.
Yes. He creates intricate physical porcelain sculptures of historically banned books. He is purposefully taking a traditional, highly fragile and permanent physical material porcelain and using it to archive intellectual ideas that authoritarian systems are actively trying to erase.
It perfectly illustrates how modern systems often attempt to control or digitize knowledge, while physical art is deployed as a permanent mechanism of subversion.
We are navigating a highly complex territory that the sources term an aesthetics of accessibility.
An aesthetics of accessibility. I think that phrase perfectly captures the tension.
It represents a vast, unresolved gray area. On one end of the spectrum, you have profound, high-stakes cultural preservation.
Like Xiao Zix's porcelain archives, or the chemical resurrection of a Rembrandt.
Exactly. On the opposite end, this same technological accessibility gives us highly commercialized, interactive digital entertainment.
Like the VR experience they mentioned.
Yeah, space control. It functions as a chaotic job simulator. Heavily inspired by the manic humor of shows like Rick and Morty, it is incredibly playful, highly interactive, and technically complex.
But does it operate as art? Or does it merely blur the boundary between an immersive video game and a fleeting digital installation?
Right, that's the question.
So the hybridization we were talking about isn't merely the blending of human and machine hardware. It is the active bleeding of high cultural heritage into pop cultural entertainment and physical spatial reality into boundless digital environments.
Precisely. If we step back and trace the underlying architectural logic connecting all of these distinct sources.
From the Caravaggio to the VR games.
Exactly. Whether we are analyzing the mechanics of a 30 million euro state-purchased Caravaggio, the macro X-ray fluorescence of a lost Rembrandt, or tactile topographical resins of Uranus, the conclusion becomes clear.
Which is?
Art's true. Enduring value does not lie in its static preservation. Its value lies in its perpetual mechanical ability to overcome limitations.
It survives through mutation.
Exactly. Whether it is overcoming the agonizing physical decay of a bedridden Matisse, the oppressive societal limits targeting banned books, or the biological sensory limits of the human optic nerve.
Art fundamentally relies on hybridization to survive.
It does. The structural transition from brick-and-mortar physical galleries to expansive spatial computing metaverses is not the death knell for traditional art. It is simply the required next phase of our creative resilience.
Which brings me back to the very beginning of our analysis and a final provocative thought I want to leave you with.
Go for it.
Think back to Jan LeCun's billion-dollar startup, AMI. He is systematically building an embodied artificial intelligence that truly comprehends three-dimensional reality.
A system that mathematically understands spatial permanence.
Yes, the physics of light, the gravity of physical objects, not just tokenized words on a digital screen, but the actual physical weight of the world. If that architecture is realized, will the ultimate, definitive art critic of the late 21st century be a machine? Are we building an intelligence that will eventually be able to analyze the physical, microscopic topography of a Rembrandt brushstroke or the deep geological depth of a tar painting with a level of profound material comprehension that far exceeds the biological limits of the human eye?
That is a staggering implication. If an artificial neural network can truly comprehend the physics of materiality, it may unlock dimensions of our own art that we simply lack the sensory capacity to perceive.
It forces us to ask not just what the art of the future will look like, but who it will ultimately be for. To read the full analyses of these incredible essays, you need to visit artdig.id. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow our social channels so you never miss out. Thank you so much for exploring the intricate, mutating mechanics of art and technology with us today.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep questioning what you see.